don't want to waste any of our time. I'm shooting to try to get done early today. There's the Pear Deck link. While you're logging in, let me share my screen with you and just show you what we're doing today. I realized this morning when I was getting everything set up for class that I forgot to post an announcement yesterday. So I went ahead and I posted that with our agenda, which we'll look at real quick. No, Sonia, it won't. It's set up to take your highest score. All right. So again, for your agenda, yesterday, I just put for yesterday since we didn't finish, just make sure you have your notes ready and your notes good to go. But today, I do want you to do workbook 3.1 and 3.2. It's a double deuce here. All right. Just keep in mind, hey, what's up, Carissa? No, Ben. It records your highest score. That's why I give you 3 attempts. That way, if you don't do so well, you can retake it. Look, everything from the Pear Decks comes straight from the workbooks, Josiah. So the workbook shouldn't take you longer than 10, 15 minutes at most. And we did most of this yesterday. We just got to cover the last two parts. And it kind of coincides with what we're going to talk about today. So I figure, why not? And then tomorrow, again, I mentioned the vocabulary quiz. Guys, it's 10 matching. That's it. Match 10 definitions to the words. 20 points. Easy. And then I found this really cool, interesting TED Talk about the Red Scare, which we're going to talk about today. So go ahead and do that Ed puzzle for tomorrow. All right? And everything should be published. The quiz is not going to open up until tomorrow morning, though. But if you want to get ahead and work on that TED Talk ahead, it's a completion grade. You just got to do it. But today we're going to be looking at the 1950s and the Red Scare. All right, so there, again, there's your Pear Deck link. Let's go ahead and get logged into that. Give me one quick second. Somebody called me on the big phone. Oh, boom. What's up, Brooklyn? Okay. All right, let's hit it. What's your stress level today? Why can't I do anything right now? Because it's only Tuesday. What's your stress level at today, you guys? I think I'm around a 3. A little low. It's only elevated. I would say normal, I would say right now, just because of my mood, the weather, where I'm at with my day's agenda, I would be right around here. But I got this crud, and it's got me up here. My testing site is Warren, Rose. Warren. Oop, wrong button. Oh, nice. Man, I am just pressing all the wrong buttons today. It's all right. It's all right. Kai, they should mail it out to you. They should be mailing it out to you. If you're not sure, reach out to your engagement coach. They should know. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think mine. Ben, I think mine's at a Holiday Inn. Actually, it's the conference room. All right, today's learning targets. By the end of today, you should be able to explain the cause and effects of the 1950s Red Scare by analyzing the influences of the HUAC and Joseph McCarthy. You're good, Faith? And you should be able to explain how the U.S. attempted to prevent the spread of communism by tracing the effects of the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine. As we mentioned before, post-World War II is going to usher in a new era of American prosperity. We talked about the baby boom and the GI Bill, creating unprecedented economic growth, meaning like they kind of didn't see it being as good as it was. The Cold War is going to cause Americans to flock towards this cultural conformity. As we're going to look at today with the Red Scare, people are going to kind of flock together with their ways of thinking. And these ways of thinking are actually going to kind of shape how the U.S. Foreign and domestic policy is moving forward really through almost the rest of the century, from the 1950s to the 1990s. It's all going to come back to this. And in this period of conformity, divergent beliefs, so people that think differently than what the conformists do, are going to be viewed as very suspicious, which we're going to talk about today. And really, it's going to be a new Red Scare, much like the one that was occurring during the 1920s that we talked about back then, a couple weeks ago. This one's going to be centered around the U.S. Congress. Here's a list of our important vocab: Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan, NATO, Warsaw Pact, 50s Red Scare, HUAC. It's not HUAC, but we could say that, give me some extra HUAC. It's HUAC, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and McCarthyism, which is a term you'll probably hear a lot in the news coming up. All right, so we briefly started to talk about the Truman Doctrine yesterday, but we kind of got rushed at the end, so this is the exact same slide. We said it was really just the idea that the United States is going to step in wherever communism pops up, can everybody else hear me? Is it just Summer? Okay, good job, Summer. All right, so wherever communism rears its ugly head from the late 1940s to the 1990s, the United States is going to aid whoever is opposing it. Okay, it's going to be important when it comes to wars and conflicts like in Korea and in Vietnam, particularly. These are going to be the big instances where the Truman Plan or the Truman Doctrine is enforced. But Harry Truman said to Congress, "I believe that it must be the policy of the U.S. to support free people who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures." This right here, this Truman Doctrine, this is the entire U.S. foreign policy from 1946 to 1991. Right? Wherever communism, and that's what you need to know. Wherever communism pops up, the United States is going to be there to try to stop it. Write it down in your notes, highlight it, put it in these words: wherever communism appears, the U.S. is going to stop it. Years 1946 to 1991. That's the Truman Doctrine. With that, we're going to see the Marshall Plan. Okay, the Marshall Plan is another anti-communist foreign policy, but this one's more humanitarian. This is the plan for rebuilding Europe after World War II. The United States is going to lend European countries a lot of money, particularly Britain, France, Belgium, and Western Germany. We're going to loan them just a ton of money to rebuild their infrastructure, their buildings, their roads, sewer systems, all of that, to get them back on track. And because we're loaning the money, we tell them really under the stipulation, hey, as long as you keep this democratic government that's capitalist and that's friendly to the United States, we're good. You don't have to pay us back. But if it's a country that is, leaning communist, we're going to make them pay back the loans. We're going to see, like we said, Germany's going to be split in half between an East and West. And Berlin, the capital city, is also going to be split in half in an East and West between communism and capitalism. And Berlin's going to kind of be like this island, because I want you to imagine an island, right, in the middle of the ocean. Right? That ocean is going to be East Germany. Okay, all communist except for Little Berlin, where only half of Little Berlin is communist. The other half is going to be this democratically U.S.-friendly half of a city. And the only way out of the city is through approved routes or to fly out. Okay? It's going to be really, really tough. And the Soviet Union is going to understand this. So they're going to put a blockade around Berlin. And they're going to not, in 1948, they're not going to let anybody out of Berlin or in to Berlin. They're not going to allow anybody to drive from West Germany to East Germany into Berlin. They're going to block everybody coming out of Western Berlin heading to West Germany. They're going to block them off. And they're going to try to starve out the United States and Britain and France. They're going to try to starve them out of Berlin so Russia can take over the whole city and control all of East Germany. Does that make sense? You guys with me? So under the Marshall Plan, brain space. Under the Marshall Plan, this guy George Marshall, who was a general during World War II, comes up with this idea called the Berlin Airlift. Okay, and basically all they're going to do is they're going to fly planes into Berlin, land them, unload supplies, and then fly out every 60 seconds for, I believe, like 2 years. There's going to be planes landing in West Berlin, unloading supplies, and then taking off and going back to West Germany and reloading. Okay, it's going to be nonstop. This landing, unload, take off, land, unload, take off. Every minute, every 60 seconds, this is going to happen for 2 straight years. And this is how they're going to keep West Berlin on the side of the United States. Okay, and again, this is called the Berlin Airlift. It's really an amazing feat of logistics and I guess foreign diplomacy in a sense where you've coordinated with other nations and coordinated supply chains with other countries, as well as aircraft and other equipment like that, to just constantly keep it going and landing in hostile territory, really. The Marshall Plan is seen as a tremendous foreign policy success, but only in the U.S. and Europe. You know, Russia and everybody else, they don't see it that way. Marshall Plan succeeds in fending off the rise of communist sentiments in Western Europe by helping them create conditions where democracy could thrive. Okay, the idea was like, hey, we're going to lend this helping hand, and we're going to basically, the United States is doing so well at this time. Remember, this is the start of that economic boom over across the ocean. We're going to share all that with Western Europe after this terrible war, and we're going to keep them on our side. And that's the Marshall Plan. Again, it's all because Europe lays in ruins, the economies are crippled, and it's all to fight against Stalin. And I think I got these 2 slides mixed up, but that's okay. We're also going to see the creation of NATO and what we call the Warsaw Pact. And again, these are things that are in the news a lot today. NATO is really the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's formed in 1949. And because of that Soviet blockade in Berlin, many Western leaders called for military alliances to stand up to these communist threats. Enter NATO. NATO members pledged to uphold democratic values. More importantly, NATO is formed as a military alliance. And what's important against it is the Article 5 of NATO, which is in the news a lot today, because it says an attack on one member is considered an attack against every member. So if, and this, before I go ahead and explain that, this is where the whole Russia-Ukraine thing comes in, because NATO was specifically created to oppose Russia, right? That's the whole point, is to oppose Russia and their communist imperialism, which is what they were doing. Ukraine was trying to join NATO. Russia saw that as a threat, hence, the most boiled down, simple response to what's going on today in Eastern Europe. Russia saw it as a threat. They invade Ukraine. Okay. So had Ukraine joined NATO and Russia invaded, all of NATO would have attacked Russia. Okay, that's how it works. It's kind of like what we talked about with World War I, where you've got all of these military alliances, and you attack one, all of a sudden you're in a world war, which President Biden has said many times when discussing if Russia continues into NATO territory. I believe his direct quote was, "We will defend every inch of NATO territory if they do invade. It's World War III." So Russia's not going to stand by, though, in the 1950s and just let this happen. They're going to do the same thing. And in 1955, they're going to form what's called the Warsaw Pact. And it's the same thing, only with Eastern European countries under Soviet control. So Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, countries like this that are communist because Russia made them communist, they're going to form the same thing. And we call this the Soviet bloc. And that's NATO and the Warsaw Pact. It is a scary thought, Marianne. Global politics, geopolitics can be very terrifying. How are you with the Truman Doctrine and NATO? How are we feeling? Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, NATO. Again, the three biggest things. U.S. foreign policy, that's the Truman Doctrine. Wherever communism pops up, the United States is going to be there to fight it, 1946 to 1991. The Marshall Plan, the plan to rebuild Europe after World War II, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed to oppose communism in Russia. Warsaw Pact, formed to oppose NATO. All right, let's shift gears because it seems like we're all good, but we're missing a lot of people. There's 72 of us in class and only 23 in this Pear Deck. So if you're just joining us and you're lost, please join in. Or if you're on that student-based one, that's okay. It's just, when I see this many students in class and not this many participating in the Pear Deck, it's a little concerning. All right, but let's shift gears. Let's talk about TV. Because TV, we're going to shift gears. We're going to come back to the United States from Europe. And let's talk about what's going on in the United States with this Red Scare. But we can't really talk about it without talking about television because it's going to play an important role. All right. So the first TVs that are commercially available are going to start coming out in 1927. The early TVs could receive airborne signals and play them back as moving images. And this was amazing at the time. And keep in mind, guys, the screens are only like this big, right? A 12-inch screen was seen that's like a movie theater screen back then. Okay. So when the TVs back then are nothing like what we have now, and they were expensive. But by the 1950s, TVs are going to become fixtures in homes across the United States, just like radios had done in the 1920s and 1930s. TVs are going to be the radio of the 1950s, and it's going to change the life all around the world, not just in the United States. Television's most powerful influence in the United States during this time is going to be its approach to politics for average Americans. Okay, it's going to basically, we're going to be able to see the president on TV and hear him talk. We're going to be able to hear members of Congress give speeches that we would have never otherwise even seen. We would never have seen the congressman from California give a speech here in Ohio, and vice versa. So these broadcasts are going to widen the public's consumption of news. Before that, the only news you would either get, some radio signals or you'd read it in a newspaper, and that's it. Maybe a magazine, but now you see it. Television is going to serve as a means for those with specific messages to spread their ideas quickly and persuasively. And this is going to be demonstrated in the 50s by broadcasting the chaotic congressional hearings over communism into the homes across the United States. And that brings us to the House Un-American Activities Committee, the HAAC. Okay. So we talked about the Red Scare in the 1920s, but the term Red Scare basically describes America's fear and how their feelings on communism. And in 1938, after that first Red Scare, the U.S. House of Representatives is going to form the House Un-American Activities Committee, or the HUAC. The committee's whole purpose was to investigate subversive actions and disloyalty to the U.S. And basically to quash any communist or fascist uprisings. Okay? We saw what happened in Europe with Hitler. We saw what happened in Russia with Lenin and the Communist Revolution. And as we talked about, a lot of those same things that happened there, that caused those revolutions to happen in Europe, those were going on here as well. So Congress basically like, hey, we need to nip this in the bud. We need to make sure this doesn't happen here. So they formed this HUAC. Okay, they were ruthless in their pursuit of un-American activities. They issued subpoenas to people and forced them to come testify in public. They forced them to talk about their political beliefs, which at the time that was not a thing. You didn't tell people in 1950s America, you didn't tell people what your political leanings were. You didn't tell people who you voted for. You didn't put big signs that say Trump or Biden in your front lawn or impeach Trump, impeach Biden. You didn't put those signs in your yard. You didn't talk about it. It was considered rude and things like that. So when the House of Representatives starts dragging people in that they think are suspected communists or fascists and making them testify in public, it's a big deal. And they compared the HUAC's approach to the witch hunts of colonial America, right? We think about the Salem witch trials where they went around and accused people of being a witch and burned them at the stake. That's kind of what was going on here. They went around and started accusing people of being communists and parading them through these proceedings, and they televised it. Okay. Some notable ones: singer, actor Paul Robeson, who was an influential in the African American community, was quoted as saying that African Americans would not fight in an imperialist war during World War II. The HUAC drug him in and accused him of being a communist, and this really ruined his career because there was a social stigma to any hint of communist sympathies. The communists were our enemies. This is a Cold War. They have nuclear capabilities. By the 1950s, Soviet Union has nuclear capabilities. They could kill us. They could destroy the world. And how could you sympathize with these people? The committee investigators used just all sorts of different pressuring techniques to make people confess in these testimonies to being communist sympathizers. Hey guys, let's keep the chat on task, please. They also tried to force the accused individuals to provide names of other people who they deemed suspicious. And once people got drug into the HUAC committees and forced to testify, they were shunned by their communities and often blacklisted from jobs. If you were a suspected communist, good luck getting a job at the post office. Good luck getting a job at the deli or at the grocery store. The HUAC also pursued government officials to demonstrate that its intention was of protecting America against espionage, against spying, right? Then this comes to light with Alger Hiss, a State Department employee, is accused of passing information to Russia, but denied it before the committee. He's later convicted of perjury, lying under oath for these statements, and he declared his innocence for the rest of his life, but he gets blacklisted and fired from his job for being a suspected communist. In 1950, a couple, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, are arrested on conspiracy charges to commit espionage by selling Soviet spies top secret information about atom bombs. And this case is broadcast in public, and it fascinated everybody, right? Much like the Rittenhouse case did a few months ago, right? Everybody was watching that on the news to see what would happen with all that was going on. Everybody was watching this case. And the couple gets convicted and executed for espionage and selling secrets to the Russians in 1953. Although they both claimed their innocence when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s and a number of their top secret documents became public, it confirmed that Julius Rosenberg was involved with the Russians, but didn't specify anything about Ethel's role. So basically, the husband was guilty, but there was no evidence against the wife, and we executed her for espionage anyway. So that brings us to McCarthyism. During these communist witch hunts, during this period of this Red Scare, a man by the name of Joseph McCarthy, who was a U.S. senator, launches an anti-communist campaign very similar to what the HUAC was doing. His single-minded pursuit of communists among the nation's influential figures became known as McCarthyism, and they started calling these witch hunts. In 1954, television networks broadcast McCarthy's Senate committee hearings as he probed possible communist influences in the army. Day after day, the live televised hearings were beamed across the nation. So people saw these hearings every day. But upon seeing McCarthy's use of aggressive and reckless tactics against these witnesses, public opinion started to turn against him. But this went on for a while. And then a guy by the name of Edward Murrow, who was a radio reporter and a well-known TV reporter, he creates a documentary series called See It Now on CBS. And this aired from 1951 to 1958. And on this documentary, they showed McCarthy and his anti-communist brigade really at their worst. They filmed it. They showed like, hey, these guys are actually kind of violating the Constitution and people's constitutional rights of due process, of being innocent until proven guilty, jury trials, things like that. And he gave commentary to the video. This Edward Murrow did. He narrated the documentary, giving commentary to what was going on. And McCarthy's mistake, he's quoted as saying, McCarthy's mistake has been to confuse dissent with disloyalty. And that's important, right? That's an important quote, I think, for us to analyze, because dissent is basically like speaking out and saying you don't agree, right? When we look at the government, we can disagree. And that's the First Amendment right? We have freedom of speech. We can disagree with the government. We can speak out. We can say Joe Biden has dementia or Donald Trump is an idiot, right? We can dissent against these leaders and nothing's going to happen to us because we have freedom of speech. Murrow is saying McCarthy's mistake is he's confusing that dissent with disloyalty. Basically saying if you don't agree with me, then you're an enemy too. If you don't agree with what I'm doing, you're a communist and you need to go to jail. And that's what Murrow is saying McCarthy is doing. McCarthy's response was to accuse Murrow of being a communist. So he kind of proved him right. But by this time, really by the mid to late 1950s, Americans are very, very tired of McCarthyism. And after this See It Now documentary comes out, the Senate censures McCarthy, basically saying like he can't do this anymore. He can't speak publicly. You can't do this because of his conduct during the hearings. And this is going to be the end of Joe McCarthy's reign of terror. And really, not really the end of the Red Scare, because we're going to have really anti-communist leanings until the 1990s. And still, you can still see presence of it today, especially when you talk to the older generations who were literally like the boomers, right? These guys were raised in this mindset that communism is the devil and the worst thing in the world, right? Because social stigmas change, right? Back in the time when these people were young, this was the social stigma. You conform to this belief, and anything deviating from it meant this. So your exit ticket is to answer the question. Answer the learning target. Explain the cause and effect of the 1950s Red Scare. I want you to, analyze the influence of the HUAC and McCarthyism when you answer this question. Okay. Let me put that on the student paste for you so I can click away. Again, you're doing workbook 3.1 and 3.2 today. They're both due Friday. Right, so you got some time. You got all of tomorrow. You got the rest of today, all of tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. They're due Friday at midnight. Don't forget Unit 3 vocab quiz tomorrow. It's 10 terms, match them to the definition, easy 20 points. You guys have the Unit 3 vocab list. You have the Quizlet. Every single one of you should get a 20 out of 20 on this. And I'm dead serious. You have 3 attempts to get your highest score. And the Red Scare TED Talk, Ed Puzzle. Just a couple questions, and it's a completion grade. So even if you get some answers wrong, as long as you answer, you're good. I just want you, really, what's most important to me is that you watch the video and you understand it. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, any concerns? Anything I can answer for you guys? Hey, it's 11 o'clock, guys. Go to science class. Don't forget about the target sessions at 12:30 and 2:30. If you have questions, if you need help, just pop on in. What's up, Josiah? But have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye, Larry. Bye, Molly. Bye, Faith.